very much for putting up with a very long day so far, but right now, to tie it all up, is Executive Vice President and President of QCT, Cristiano Amon.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I realize I'm just the last presenter of a long day, and I'm just between you and food and the demos. So I'll try to not to keep you for much later. Hopefully you got exciting news from us today. I think we have a lot of things that we've been working on. And the industry, getting ahead of Mobile World Congress, and the industry is going to so much transformations. There's a lot of things changing, but I think there is a very common topic that always resonates very well with Qualcomm, which is, I think there's no question mobile is the largest platform right now for mankind, and I think we see mobile technology going to a number of different industry and segments, and I think we'd never felt so good about the mobile segment as we feel about it right now. So what I'm going to do, maybe at the end of this presentation, is to talk a little bit about 5G. And we have been very focused and working very hard, I think, to basically bring 5G technology as early as we can to the industry. And I think every time we're in this time in between Gs, but every time, we have an opportunity, and we have once every 10 years, to bring, a brand new technology. It's an opportunity to actually change everything in the industry. I think it'll be hard for people to think about it back in the late 90s about what would the smartphone and 4G, full potential bring in to the industry, but it takes that long for technology, to get planned. Most of the times we will not know the full potential of the technology, but those things, the underpinnings of what's going to make the 5G a reality, is the things we've been working on for a while now, and we're getting closer and closer to be able to bring that to reality. So that's what I'm going to be talking to you today, is how we are on a path to 5G. So one of the things that it's very important, and we're excited about it, is this concept. I think we started to talk about it in CS of the 5G economy. We did a study to understand the economic impact on 5G. And let me stop you for a second and go back in time. There is no question, even though I think there's going to be a lot of companies that probably dispute that, but there is no question that there's been a whole new economy enabled by what we'll be able to do with 3G, with 4G, in the smartphone. You will not have business models like Uber, like Instagram, like Snapchat, and a number of different things that we now see and take for granted has been enabled by actually having the ability to give a mobile computer and a high-speed broadband, and the whole consumer electronics. They used to be in a separate industry, all integrated into a smartphone and put in everybody's hand. So in that, there is no question that created economic growth. I will argue that the countries that led with 4G probably had an advantage in the ability to build the 4G economy. And you can do the correlation. You can see about the investment in infrastructure in 4G and the emergence of these new business models that rely on top of mobile. So it should not be any different for 5G. And I think that study confirmed that 5G will continue to take mobile forward, and it's going to be very significant for economic development. I think it could be as significant. I think our CEO said it's going to be as significant as the change caused by electricity in automobiles. And I think how we think about making 5G the next big evolution of wireless is to taking care that actually going to address all of those things. And I'll talk a little bit about that today. So still on the 5G economy, we estimated through this study that there's about 12 trillion of 5G-related goods and services by 2035. So a lot of people ask me, so where's that coming from? And I think it clearly shows there's a number of different industries. And when you think about it, you're going to be having a very large and pervasive connectivity. If you accept now that no matter what, the last mile of data is going to be wireless, if you accept that by basically everything gets connected to the cloud, and you started to bring to wireless the reliability that you have today of mission-critical services. If you accept that you'll be able to have in the common infrastructure both high speeds and low speeds, and you start to make everything connected intelligence, there's a number of industries that can change. I think we would argue the top three that came out of this study was manufacturing first, information and communication second, wholesale and retail was number three. And I think when you look at it, like nearly as much as all consumers in the United States spent in 2016, more than China, Japan, France, Germany, and UK combined last year. So there is an enormous amount of opportunity for economic growth as you start to transform industry. And look, not to use the cachet, but I think there is this common term that is starting to be used, which is what is going to be the next industrial revolution. Like this whole discussion that we just had on IoT. If you think about machines are connected and machines are able to have, edge processing and they're connected to the cloud, you can see, for example, things today that, are able to collect data, analyze data, and then, go back into an action. You can see a clear situation where you could have, for example, machines in the field, they measure their performance, they analyze their performance against a set of parameters. They run a set of applications in that processor in that machine, and if they need to be upgraded or replacement, they contact directly with the SAP system of the enterprise and order their own upgrade. So, but I think the opportunities also to change, manufacturing, retail are enormous, and I think that's what we think the potential is going to be with 5G. And the 5G value chain could create about 22 million jobs worldwide. And I think, when we look at this, the 5G value chain alone could generate 3.5 trillion in revenue in 2035 and associated with 22 million jobs. It is more than the population of Beijing. So for all those reasons, I think we take 5G very seriously. And I think, of course, our view is no different than what happened with 3G and 4G. I think it's going to be very important to drive to an accelerated transition to 5G technology. So with that, I think I'm going to get into a different area and go to the message that I wanted to deliver to you today about how do we get there. So the way we think about 5G technology is going to be one integrated system. It's going to be like one pervasive connectivity fabric that will take full advantage of the underlying technology. So what you see on the right side of this chart, and I think that's the discussion that we have, I think, with regulators worldwide. We almost like joke that resistance is futile, right? Every spectrum is going to have to get allocated for mobile data. I think more and more, you need more data, you need more capability in the wireless network. So 5G will be able to operate at high bands, what's called the millimeter wave bands, as well as the sub-6, which will include the mid-bands and the low bands. And it's going to be one integrated system that will work in the entire spectrum band, will make use of licensed and unlicensed spectrum, and will connect both very high-speed services to low-speed services to mission-critical services. And the underlying technology that's going to make this happen is actually for a very successful and seamless introduction of 5G. It will be the technology of 4G LTE, which continues to evolve, and I think you're going to see a demo today on gigabit LTE. Is LTE in the unlicensed spectrum, and then the evolution of Wi-Fi. As we see the full convergence of the networks, we see convergence of the home, the enterprise, the mobile networks, with the networks being densified, the use of licensed and unlicensed spectrum with LTE, LAA, license assisted access into 3GPP, and the addition of more speeds. So that's how 5G deployment is going to happen. And of course, from a Qualcomm standpoint, we believe that you have to have leadership in all of those areas to be able to have leadership in 5G. So it's not only about having leadership in 4G. It's about leadership in 4G. It's about our leadership in Wi-Fi. And it's about leadership in utilization of spectrum. One of the challenges that we had as we took on 4G early on, it was that we understood that with 4G, you will need, different than what happened to 3G, you needed to aggregate more spectrum. There's over 60 bands right now. in 3GPP, and you think about LTE Advanced and LTE Advanced Pro, you start thinking about aggregation of those different carriers. So you have a complexity in the industry. When you think about cellular, that is now, you're trying to deliver a global scale into a smartphone. They're going to launch worldwide, and it's going to roam across the world. On top of that, you want to take that technology into automobiles, into the Internet of Things, into industrial, cellular, and cloud-connected devices. So you have to tackle the RF problem. And I think that's one of the things that we're doing. We're spending a significant amount of investment. And I think recently, last week, we announced the closure of our joint venture with TDK for filters. APCOs is one of the world leaders in filters. And we've been investing for a number of years in actually building the technology that it will be able to abstract the complexity of a very, complex RF environment, bring that to the economies of scale that are required in mobile, and actually take that from mobile to a different industries. That's why you see Qualcomm for years preparing and building this RF 360. Now that we have closed the joint venture with TDK, we have all the pieces from digital to the antenna, and we see the further deployments of 4G and the upcoming of 5G. It's a great opportunity for us to actually solve that problem for the industry and provide, the full potential of those technologies, making use of all possible frequency bands. So another important thing is, as we think about the evolution of 5G, is how you should think about 5G intercepting with things that are happening right now in LTE. So one thing we're talking about today, and we have a demonstration, is gigabit LTE. I think we've been throughout the 2016, and I think now in 17, we're starting to get that commercialized. It's actually very exciting. There are some phones that are going to be part of announcements in Barcelona that has been doing gigabit speeds over 10 minutes straight. You don't even feel any change in thermal, and it's within the expected days of use of a battery life. So actually, it took a lot of work to get to that gigabit speed in mobile. I think it's a breakthrough for you to think about gigabit. You used to only see that in gigabit Ethernet, and you have that in mobile devices. And I think as that become more pervasive, you're starting to have different type of services going to phones. So I try to provide you some practical examples. We are seeing this unequivocally. It's happening in the United States market, it's happening in other markets. You're seeing that the concept of consuming television and broadcast is changing. So if you look things like AT&T and DirecTV, and I think that's just the beginning of what's going to happen. You see in the UK, I think the merger of BT and EE. So I think probably I will argue that millennials and centennials, they won't only consume television looking at TV. A mobile device is a TV. A tablet is a TV. A computer is a TV. And you started to think about consuming TV in a completely different way. So if you have to think about, we just talked during the day today about distributed Wi-Fi. You have to have Wi-Fi in the home and in the office with quality everywhere, because that's going to become a video distribution systems. And as you think about the high-speed LTE with gigabit, it should be the norm. They will be able to actually consume, all of your television content, no matter how many channels it's going to be, through a mobile network, because that's the devices we carry. On top of that, you have, VR and augmented reality and a number of other services. They're going to be benefit from gigabit LTE. The whole concept of computing. We announced last year that we're entering into the PC space with the first Windows 10 full PC on a Snapdragon that's going to be available later in this year when we're going to start to ship. Gigabit LTE provides a whole different new cloud computing experience. In particular, as all of us start thinking about the services that exist to keep the content in the cloud, whether it's going to be the Microsoft OneDrive or any other cloud drive. So Gigabit LTE, it's the next necessary step. And I think once we get that, you started to be able to see some of the 5G use cases and a seamless transition between 4G and 5G as that technology gets deployed. Same thing is what we think is the transformation in automotive and the transformation of mission-critical services in general. So today, one of the deficiencies of wireless is like a best, it's a best service network. But if you want to have a reliability of the multiple nines of reliability, it is not a mission-critical service today. But if the last mile data to humans or machines are going to be wireless, you need to get to that reliability. That's one of the features of 5G. And that's why you started to see that technology also being part of the discussion about the future of the automotive industry with cellular to infrastructure connection. With cellular to infrastructure connection, you can change the concept entirely about like road signs. They can be virtually placed anywhere. If the cellular is always connected to the infrastructure, the concept of a live map, the concept of the car interacting not with other cars, but other things around the car, including with pedestrians. So I think that ability to have the mission-critical service will create a whole new industry, and it will actually change the automotive industry, as we saw, the number of changes happen in consumer electronics industry to mobile. And the last thing, I think, building on Raj's presentation, is the opportunity of doing cellular IoT. I think the ability to abstract so that you can connect anything, and using the cellular network, you don't need to know the SSID, you don't need to know the password. You actually can have even a concept of a global SIM, that you have some device manufacturer somewhere and it go everywhere. With the massive connectivity of cellular IoT, that's what's going to allow to change the industry and create a lot of the new business models we talk about it. And those things are happening now with 4G, and I think that's the beauty of this. As we continue to advance 4G and pave the way so we actually have a seamless transition to 5G. And I think one good example of that is the number of deployments that we see on gigabit LTE. The ability to leverage unlicensed spectrum make it very easy for operators worldwide to get to gigabit speed. So it is not one or two deployments that we're seeing. There are a number of deployments right now in gigabit LTE, and we're going to see that continue to extend, and it's a very good thing for the mobile industry. And it's all building upon the LTE advanced carrier aggregation, which even now you see that in China, for example, which is a very competitive and price competitive market, you see the entire mid-tier moving to LTE carrier aggregation and LTE carrier, advanced. And I think, that leads to, how we think about that as an anchor in a major step to 5G, as just talk about it. The ability to get that and evolve that, including to an improvement latency with ULL, it's going to make 5G a success. So the combination of all of those things is really what will make 5G a reality. We can start building on top of the 4G infrastructure with gigabit LTE. We will get to improve the latency on 4G with ULL, and that's actually coming to the standards because of 5G. So you actually have seamless transition of low latency applications between 4G and 5G. We will get to efficient use of a licensed and unlicensed spectrum, but also by advancing Wi-Fi to 802.11ax into millimeter wave Wi-Fi with 60 gigahertz. And that will drive to, on top of that, the initial of the rollout to the 5G NR. 5G NR is the new nomenclature, I think, for the 5G radio. It's 5G new radio. I think 3GPP just published a new logo for 5G. And I think we believe at this point, as early as 2019, we'll be able to see commercial rollouts of 5G NR. That's going to be as early as in 2019. And we're very excited about the transition to 5G. And I think that's what we had to present it today. We have a few minutes for questions, but hopefully I'll be able to get you excited about 5G. Yes?
I'm hoping you can talk a little more about how you see 5G as net jobs positive and where those jobs are, because as we've speculated a lot about 5G transformations, they've generally been about job elimination. Autonomous taxis getting rid of the Uber drivers and the truck drivers, autonomous stores getting rid of the supermarket baggers, generally autonomous X getting rid of manual or semi-skilled labor or Y. Where are these 22 million million jobs, and are they going to net positive, or are we going to be in some sort of unemployment crisis because of massive automation?
Well, that's a loaded question right there. Okay, so maybe I'll give you an answer, I think, from what we do, which is to continue to develop the technology forward. I think I cannot tell you precisely, and if the jobs that we basically refer to are net positive. What I can tell you is a 5G economy we believe by 2035 will add that number of jobs, new jobs associated with 5G. I cannot tell you if it's net positive, but here's what I can tell you. I think, at the end of the day, I think there's always going to be a transformation of business models. I think if you look at Silicon Valley, that the whole Silicon Valley has been built upon the transformation of business models. And I think it's very difficult for us to predict every single business model that will rely on top of 5G, but we know we needed to provide that infrastructure. We need to provide an interconnection fabric because that's what will be the platform that will enable. It's no different than 4G. Maybe to give you a specific answer, and I mentioned briefly, we see the manufacturing as one very important area that will benefit from that. I think as you get machines to be connected and smarter, I think you have to a new whole cycle of productivity, control, and automation, cloud-based control. There's a lot of things you can do there. Even there's a lot of things when you have multiple different sites, how you can actually use communications to integrate those. I think we see a lot of opportunities in retail. You can change retail. I think the e-commerce had changed retail dramatically. I will argue that, and then going that into 4G, the ability for you to shop on a mobile phone, if you have an interactive shopping experience, as you have the ability to rely on things like augmented reality and virtual reality, and you do that in scale, I think you're going to have a change in retail. I think the other one that we highlighted about was the communications industry in general. I think the communications industry and the IT industry always go to different cycles, but I would argue if everything is connected, there are a lot more things you can run from the cloud base that you can run locally. So how you think about the communications industry, the whole concept of what can you host into the cloud, I think there's a number of opportunities there as you actually build a bigger infrastructure. The whole thing about communication is also, I do fundamentally believe that it changes to an accelerated convergence how we should think about different communications network. Like, for example, I give you the example of a television. It is a reality that a large percentage of the internet today, for example, with Netflix, is one of the large use cases of the United States internet. And where is the difference how you consume, for example, video on your phone, on your tablet, on a television? So I think you will drive an accelerated convergence, and I think that could create a number of interesting business models, as we're starting to see that today. So I think that's probably what I could do at this time. But if you're interested, I think we can ask the team to share the details of the economic study, including where did the job breakdown are.
Ronald Griff from Frost & Sullivan. I see, sort of two extremes happening with 5G. On the one hand, you have, carriers here locally, AT&T and Verizon and the like, very interested, and in fact even doing some trials before there is even a standard, which is almost unheard of in the industry, right? It didn't happen so much before. At the other end of the spectrum, I was thinking about our native Brazil. Last year at FutureCom, the Vivo CEO, Amos, made that statement that he didn't see 5G happening in Brazil until 2022 at the earliest. So I was wondering maybe if there's, obviously operators are your downstream customers, but still you obviously have to pay attention to what they're saying. Is there maybe an opportunity for you guys to help maybe these smart followers, let's call them like that, sort of prepare, because they're going to deploy 5G a little bit later on. just to have them sort of be ready. And I know we've seen already some activities happening, 4.9G, whatever it's been called, 4.5G, 4.9G. Is there an opportunity maybe for Qualcomm to help those other operators and sort of the vendors to assist those operators? Thanks.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for the question. By the way, nothing, I've been born and raised in Brazil too, and I understand exactly what the question is. Nothing will get me happier to see, an accelerated. I think if you look back in history, that's what happened. I think you always have some of the developed economies moving faster in technology than emerging markets. It's been no different than what happened with 3G and 4G. Now, let me maybe try to offer a silver lining on this. I think one of the things that I think all of the operators, I think, will go through that cycle, and I think that I wanted to give a concrete example on gigabit LTE, call the attention to the concept of broadcast and television content conversions. I want to bring above VR and R. The first thing an operator will do when you're going to think about the existing phones, right? If to say you have your smartphone today, and I say, okay, maybe it's a huge step for you to go to a gigabit LTE. It's a significant change in user experience. Then we improve the latency. And then I'm going to say, but with 5G, I can give you maybe minimum 5 gigabit. And the initial reaction said, why do I need this on the phone? But in reality, I think we saw over the years, the more bandwidth you give it to users, are going to use it. The silver lining on this discussion is the economic model of 5G, if you start taking into consideration that mobile technology is not unique to smartphones, but is actually going to the automotive industry, is going to the Internet of Things industry, is going to the smart cities and infrastructure upgrades of municipalities. An operator will have an ability to have a different business model on a new technology transition, which is just the upgrade of existing base. And I think that could change the speed of a 5G deployment. At least that's what we hope. The other thing that I'll say it's a positive thing is there has been an understanding today, and I think we saw in Europe in particular, we saw a lot of activities that we were very excited to see about the importance of 5G, the importance of the gigabit society, because I think there has been an understanding that 4G did change, in many cases, the economy by creating different business models that rely on top. I think Uber was an example. I think we talk about it today. There's a bunch of different industries that came out on top. So I think there was a realization that it is an issue on overall industry competitiveness. If you have like a manufacturing base and the manufacturing base is going to become a smart manufacturing base, how do you think about it if you don't have the infrastructure? So I think the dialogue is in place and we're actually excited about it. It's difficult to predict. I think it's very difficult to make any prediction, but I think the business model for 5G could be more inclusive of the industry, and that could be an incentive for markets to accelerate its deployment.
We have to reverse the decline in productivity, which has been a long time forming in a long time. U.S. is down significantly. The whole world is down. So if you have color or any comments on how 5G solves that problem, I know it's a big sort of question, but a few comments would be great.
Very good. Okay, I'm not sure I understand the second question. We want to reverse
the decline in productivity in a worldwide basis.
Okay. Look, those are difficult questions to answer, so I'll give it a shot. But maybe let me tackle the first one first. I think we are in this time in between Gs. This is an exciting time in the industry, and particularly because, see, the issue that we have to do, and particularly in the role that we play, we have to be thinking about how to develop all the technologies that you can build as a platform, that you can build a business on top. And we're going to have some of the answers, but some of the answers we're not going to have it. But we want to make sure that the technology is resilient, actually to last for a long time. And it's no different than what happened with 3G and 4G.